Breaking news here on CBS Sports HQ from the world of college basketball. North Carolina is ranked number 1 in the preseason top 25. Hubert Davis and the Tar Heels went on a surprising run to the national title game last season. With 4 starters back, including big man Armando Bacot, the Tar Heels earned 47 of 62 first-place votes, easily beating out number 2 Gonzaga, who had the top preseason spot for the past 2 years. As we take a look at what the top 10 looks like, Houston is sitting at 3, the program's highest ranking since 1983. Kentucky has reigning Player of the Year Oscar Tshiebwe back. They are ranked 4th. Baylor and defending champion Kansas tied for number 5. Duke enters its first season of the post-Coach K era at 7. And then it's UCLA, Creighton, and Arkansas rounding out the top 10. Let's welcome in college basketball writer Gary Parrish. Gary, I'll start by getting your reaction to North Carolina being ranked as the number 1 team heading into the new season.
It obviously makes sense. It does contradict my CBS Sports Top 25. And when I had UNC number 1 for much of the offseason, but once Gonzaga, remade its roster and added talent via the transfer pool, I put the Zags at number 1, North Carolina at number 2. But again, North Carolina being number 1 makes total sense to me. If you want to vote them that way, you're not going to get an objection from over here. They're returning 4 of the 5 starters from a team that obviously played in the national championship game against Kansas. Among them are Armando Bacot, who is going to be a preseason first-team All-American. They added a transfer in Pete Nance, who should be able to slide in and take the starting position that Brady Manick is vacating. And so it looks like Hubert Davis' second year after replacing Roy Williams in Chapel Hill is going to start with ridiculously high expectations. Not unfair expectations, but certainly high expectations.
The final AP poll from last season, 5 of the top 10 teams appear in the preseason AP poll, of the preseason poll for this season. So when you look at Gonzaga, Gary, does that put a little bit maybe of a chip on their shoulder coming into the season as they get knocked down to number 2 in the preseason poll?
Perhaps, but Mark Few runs his program with a total lack of chip on his shoulder, and I think his players tend to fall in line with that. They know they're really good once again and have an opportunity to make another Final Four and perhaps win that program's first national championship. If you look in the betting markets, the co-favorites to win the national championship are actually Gonzaga and Houston, not North Carolina. So I've said for a while that I didn't think there would be a consensus number 1 preseason team like there is in some years. You could reasonably go with Carolina, Gonzaga, Houston, or I think even Kentucky. But the Zags are going to be either at or near the top of the AP poll all season long. The non-league schedule is challenging as always, but assuming they get through it with very little issue, then they're going to run through the West Coast Conference once again and be in position to maybe get yet another number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament.
And as we mentioned, they've been number 1 coming into the season for the past 2 seasons, but going in number 2 this year behind North Carolina. What about your expectations for Duke? They appear here in the top 10. The post-Coach K era begins with Jon Scheyer. So what are your expectations for Duke as they head into the new season?
I have high expectations, but also some concerns. The high expectations are rooted in the talent. This is a school that just enrolled the number 1 recruiting class in America, and that's a class that includes 3 of the top 4 prospects in the class of 2022. Among them, Derek Lively, who is a 7'1" rim protector, just really awesome traditional big. But, we've been reminded over and over again in recent history that just having a bunch of talented freshmen doesn't guarantee anything. Penny Hardaway at Memphis enrolled the number 1 recruiting class in 2 recent years, and neither one of those teams really lived up to expectations. When you combine that fact with the fact that Duke has a first-time head coach, things could get complicated, particularly in a tough ACC where the Blue Devils are probably, despite all that talent, still looking up at North Carolina. But ultimately, I'm a believer in that things are going to go well. Jon Scheyer has spent the past year recruiting like crazy to set himself up for success in year 1, and I think he is going to have a lot of success. But as I've said a million times over the years, you can never be sure that a great assistant is going to be a great head coach until you watch them do it. The list of guys who were incredible assistant coaches, incredible recruiters, who I thought would make incredible head coaches, but just for whatever reason, it didn't go their way. That list is pretty long, if I'm being honest. I do not think John Shire will join that list, but obviously you've got to leave open that possibility until he does the job on game day. It's fair to wonder if he's going to be able to do the job on game day to the level that is expected at Duke.
They were sitting at number 9 in the final AP poll last season. They start the preseason as number 7. So, Gary, you mentioned it, the top 25 and 1. How does this top 10 compare to what you're looking at in the top 25 and 1?
It's almost identical. I mean, slightly different order, but 9 of the 10 schools I have in the top 10 of the top 25 and 1 are also in the top 10 of the AP poll. The only difference here would be the AP voters have Creighton at number 9. Inside the top 10, I have Creighton at 11, just outside of the top 10. Instead of Creighton in my top 10, I've got Tennessee, which AP voters have 11. So again, this is always the case, in part because I do think the top 25 and 1 and other preseason rankings from across the internet provide a guide on some level for AP voters to follow. So we do fall into a little bit of a groupthink thing as the preseason unwinds and opening night approaches. But still, I looked at the AP poll, and though I would differ here and there slightly, largely think the AP voters did a good job with this.
Because great minds think alike. College basketball writer Gary Parrish joining us here on CBS Sports HQ. The preseason AP poll is out for college basketball. North Carolina are number 1. Great to see you, Gary. Thanks very much for hopping on with us. And, of course, for more analysis on this preseason top 25, be sure to check out the Eye on College Basketball podcast. Gary Parrish, Matt Norlander. You can download and follow wherever you get your podcast audio.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.